Two Davids Walk Into a Bar was filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Listening to Two Davids Walk Into a Bar. I, as always, am David Anderson, and with me, as always, is Mr. David Lawler. How are you tonight, sir?
It's showtime.
Yeah, we're talking about Showtime.
That was Roy Scheider, all that jazz.
Yeah, I was thinking either that or The Mask.
Or The Mask, yeah. Somebody has stopped me.
I want to plug you. Remember, I'm going to plug you right now.
Don't play. Can you put a little something on that before you put it in there? Oh.
Okay. He is
Dang!
Play with the flavin'. Mr. David Lawler is the author of the Vintage Cable Box articles, which you can find on blissville.net and vhsrewind.com. And he talks about all of his cable memories, and they are great articles, so please read them.
Thank you very much for that plug. Once again, I'm going to do my Ted Night. Tonight we're going to talk about, and I have a picture of Ted Night every time I try to do my horrible Ted Night impersonation. I've got a picture there. The way it starts is July 1st, 1976. Showtime used the same exploratory model to launch as a station as did HBO. HBO started, of course, in the small town of Wilkes-Barre outside of Philadelphia, but Showtime started on the West Coast as part of the Times Mirror cable system in Escondido, Long Beach, and Palos Verdes, California, through the conversion of 10,000 subscribers of the previous Channel 1 franchise. I have no idea what that is. And then they launched on Viacom's Cablevision system in Dublin, California.
Yeah, and I think that Viacom, like, pretty much, I thought that, did they buy the whole sort of shebang at some point? Because it would become a Viacom.
Well, yeah, they bought the shebang, and then they wind up selling it, converting it to cash and stocks, and becoming incredibly wealthy over the course of, I want to say, 4 years, I guess, 1980. And then... Yeah,
and I actually had Viacom cable, so maybe that was part of the service. I know I had HBO too, but I had Viacom cable. I remember
Showtime not being an East Coast thing for a couple of years. I think it was primarily West through Central area of the country that received Showtime, and then Showtime came into the 80s. It went east.
I always saw Showtime as a reaction to HBO. And maybe this was just, like you said, they bought it. So, like, it was maybe a whole bunch of these little companies starting up movie services.
Yeah.
And then slowly, other companies would buy them up or they'd merge or whatever.
It didn't really become any kind of competition for HBO until 1978 when it became nationally distributed. And then satellites were then bouncing signals.
And then it became way easier. And then, of course, this was the time when you could have a satellite and you could just pick everything was free over the air and nobody had satellite dishes. And then they would end up making a law that says, yes, it is legal to pick up the signal, and it is upon the service providers to either scramble it or not scramble it, but it's up to you guys.
I'll tell you what I also remember about Showtime is that their voiceover announcer, who would say the following movie is rated R, sounded a little bit like the HBO guy who said it, but he was slightly different.
Yeah, my early Showtime memories are of parental guidance is therefore suggested, or something like that.
Yeah, it was kind of, and also I believe the guy who did the voice of Showtime was also the on-air announcer for a while. He was the on-air announcer for Channel 11 WPIX. In New York, because you remember those voices. You do remember.
Oh yeah,
those.
And I know he wasn't Don DeLaFontaine, and I know he wasn't Ernie Anderson.
Showtime, in my getting into personal stories a little bit, Showtime was never a go-to cable network for me. Whenever we had cable, we always made sure to have HBO. That was like the thing you had to have. If you had a little extra money, because Showtime's around the same price, it might actually have been cheaper if they tried to push it. I noticed a lot of time in the cable service systems would try to push Showtime for $2 or $3 cheaper than HBO.
I remember Showtime being cheaper too, but that may have been because I had Viacom cable. Maybe it was a special part of the service.
And also, I think Comcast, Upstate, Xfinity Comcast that we had in Brewster, also offered Showtime in a package deal. And it was cheaper.
Well, yeah, because remember, Comcast bought up TCI, which bought up Viacom. So it's basically they grandfathered in their cheaper price. For all we know.
So I only remember like clutches of time where we were watching Showtime, and I think we were fortunate to have it, you know, between, I don't know, the years 2008 and 2014 or something, because that was some of the best programming they had far as original.
The Dexter years.
Yeah. It was Dexter. It was Chris Isaac's show. Bronwyn watched it. She was a big
the thing
big
I remember
fan
about
of
that show was all I remember about that show was a couple things. It was his sort of weird band. And then there was this woman that he would go talk to that was sort of always on like a naked, like rotating bed or something.
Yeah, she was a mermaid. She was a naked mermaid inside a kind of a snow globe thing, and for some reason he would kind of transport into that snow globe and just converse with her about whatever was going on in each episode. Very quirky kind of stuff, and she was really into that. Plus, she loves Chris Isaac anyway. And then you had Dead Like Me. You had.
I love that show.
The L Word. You had Fat Actress, which I actually enjoyed. Didn't laugh that show.
One season, which was awesome, but it kind of ended on a brilliant, sort of hilarious note of where she ended up and what she ended up doing at the end of the season.
Yes,
I thought.
I don't know why. It was kind of like watching a train wreck. It was really.
Can we please put in the clip of her trying to find the fat pants, because I think that exemplifies fat pants.
Oh, one of my favorite ones was the one where they kept saying she was pregnant. Kirstie Alley's pregnant. She's pregnant. And she's like, I am not pregnant. I am just fucking fat. Okay. That was like one of my favorite things. Okay, and then it was also Weeds, which we watched for a long time until it got really stupid.
I watched that to the bitter end, yes.
Never got into Dexter, though, but we did watch Californication. We watched United States of Terror. And then after that, we didn't have Showtime anymore. We had moved. So we didn't really... I mean, I remember catching one episode of Shameless, but I didn't really like watch any of the other stuff.
I love it. I'm still watching Shameless.
And then there's Homeland and Ray Donovan. A lot of people love that stuff.
I love both of those.
Always telling me to watch, and I don't have Showtime. I don't feel like spending the extra $10, $12.
Well, you know what's interesting though is because some of these shows, I mean, you have Netflix, and a lot of these shows they resell these shows, and they'll be on Netflix, and you can watch them there. I'm just remembering. Okay, you remember that? Okay, there was the movie The Paper Chase.
Right.
Then there was the television show The Paper Chase.
Yes.
But that only, I think maybe was it on CBS? I don't know. It was on network TV.
The Paper Chase was Showtime's first television show.
That's what I was going to get to. That was, and then it was The Paper Chase, like the final years or the college of the college. It was some sort of like extension of it. Yeah. And everybody there was like, there was a lot of the cast from, I think, even the movie. But these people were like in their mid-30s.
Yes,
in college.
It's kind of like remember when they made a TV show of Fame, and Fame was syndicated. Now let's move to 1982. Yeah. When their first made-for-cable movie, it was called Falcon's Gold. I never heard of it before, but it premiered on Showtime's network. And also their first original series was Fairy Tale Theater. Now, I remember Fairy Tale Theater.
I do too. I remember.
Not because I had a chance to see it, but because they actually produced it. They put it on video, so I rented the videotapes and watched them.
I have a still. This goes over to Laserdisc, but I have like a still sealed Laserdisc of the one that they did where it was Pinocchio with Paul Rubens / Pee Wee Herman.
Oh wow!
And I have that still, and I got it, and I'm sure, and I looked it up, and it might even be like a rotter disc. It might not even play. I don't even know. I was like,
you should really give it a shot and give it a spin.
See what it looks like.
It's probably going to look like hell, though. You know?
It might look like hell. It was from that weird period where they didn't quite have it together. But I think
because it was shot on video, right?
Everything was shot on video. I'm trying to remember other things. There was like Princess and the Pea.
Right, that was
with Liza Minnelli.
Liza Minnelli, yeah, and there was also Thumbelina with Carrie Fisher.
Hansel and Gretel with Ricky Schroeder. I remember.
I remember Christopher Reeve starring in an episode. I believe Billy Crystal, Terry Garr, and then a couple of years later, I know Shelley Duvall would also produce a version of it for teens and adults called Nightmare Classics.
I remember that, and much sad thing. Years later, Shelley Duvall would completely lose her shit. And be out of her damn mind. And
it is sad.
It makes me sad.
What happened to Shelley Duvall. Because she was actually one of the first of the modern age of these women who became producers. August of 1982, MCA, Gulf Western, and Warner Communications reached an agreement to jointly acquire the Movie Channel, in which 3 companies combined would acquire a controlling 75% interest in the service. Movie Channel, of course, being a part of the Showtime Networks. One of the bigger complaints was that Showtime kind of had a limited package for a while until they had acquired titles from Paramount.
Yeah,
and
at the outrageous price even today of $1 billion.
But they had Paramount during a very good. Well, Paramount was never a company that Paramount has always had success, and especially during the 80s.
They hit them at that sweet spot point of like cranking out hit after hit. I mean, we kind of talked about
like
this
1984 through.
It was from 80
to the 90s.
Every movie that they produced from 1980, I think it was 83 because Trading Places was an exclusive. I remember that. So basically, any movie from I think 83, 84, 85, 86, and 87 were their years when they had and of course after 87, every movie from 88 I think until 98 was HBO, and they bought them up. They must have given them an even better deal, and then it switched back over to Showtime when Showtime.
And then it just kept doing it, right?
Yeah, it kind of switched over, and now Paramount movies are actually part of the Epix package because they got together with Paramount and MGM and Lionsgate got together and created their own premium service called Epix, and now through a weird series of events, now the Epix channel is now fully owned by MGM. So which is great because it's a great dumping ground for all those.
I have a little
titles that they own.
I did a little research, and maybe you can help me out with this.
All right.
About the first Star Wars broadcast on cable. Now,
yes.
Now we remember that HBO swept in and was able to premiere Star Wars before Showtime managed it.
Yeah. Well, I think
now Showtime, but I saw an ad that looked like it was from Showtime, and it said, this is the only place where you can get a stereo version of Star Wars.
Interesting.
So yeah, Showtime was hawking a stereo version of Star Wars. I guess HBO was mono.
Here's what I remember about that on the technical front of that, and I think that Movie Channel did this too, although I think that they would do it. It's really funny. There was actually like this ad, and I wish I could find it. It was actually an ad for the Movie Channel. You can watch movies in stereo, but they promoted like you can watch the movie Jaws in stereo. The movie Jaws was not a stereo release. It was actually, if you get it in stereo now, it is a full up to down remix. But they're like, you can hear the sound of Jaws in stereo. Jaws was not a stereo film, but that's a side point. I think what they did was, and this was kind of like when you had cable. When you could listen to FM radio, like your local FM radio station, and they would give you this sort of converter thing, and then you could listen on an FM channel, and everything would be weirdly askewed. It wouldn't exactly be the same frequency as your radio station. And I think that's what they did. They would get it off the satellite, because when you get it off the satellite, you can get multiple sound channels, and then they would sort of down convert it to the FM thing, and then you'd have to have your FM converted. It was this weird sort of Rube Goldberg-y setup.
Oh, where you had your like a simulcast.
Yeah, like a simulcast, yeah. And there would be like local broadcasts. I remember watching 2001, and there was a stereo simulcast. It's kind of like that, like on network TV or on.
What I remember of stereo simulcasts would be that you would have John Williams conducting the Boston Pops for PBS, and then I would say this is being simulcast in stereo on FM channel 101.8. You go to that channel, and it's all synced up.
It's basically the same thing, except it would be through your cable company. This was right before there would be like a broad MTS, the multi-channel television sound sort of broadcast standard, and then they would do what they would do then is that they would get it off the satellite, and then
before cable boxes had RCA jacks,
Yeah,
it was all feeding in through one coaxial cable.
Big complicated setup that you had to have, and I'm sure the wife acceptance factor on that was very low. But we were talking about Star Wars and like the early premiere of.
Well, it was like they may have scooped us on this, but we're going to offer it in stereo, and it's probably a good portion of the population that were kind of like early adopters in that.
When it became available I think that basically became available to all cable services would be able to, but I think Showtime somehow got the rights to like on the first day or something, maybe they paid extra, and they were like, we will premiere it on this day. And I remember I think they premiered it at 7:00 in the morning on like that day. I think it was February. Was it February 1st?
Yeah.
And they premiered it, and I actually recorded it I got a special tape on my Zenith Beta. And I'm like, I'm going to get this. And they're like, I basically stopped recording and then went right to school, because this is when you could actually go to school at like 9:30
yes.
back in those days.
Yes.
But it turns out it had actually HBO swooped in and scooped them and premiered it at like midnight, and it may not even be on the schedule. Like if you can find an HBO guide for that day, that may have been like a last minute
maybe like one of those to be announced things.
Yes.
Where sometimes HBO, well, I remember Cinemax mainly doing it when I had the channel. They would, like in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., there would be to be announced, and it would be something that would premiere like in a month or so.
Yeah, they usually do that around I remember they called it like they did it on HBO. They called it the HBO Christmas present. I remember because it would say HBO Christmas present or something, or it'd say to be announced, and it would basically be around Christmas. They would show a movie. That was how they showed I remember they showed Ghostbusters about 5 or 6 months early, and then it wouldn't show again until like May or June. They did that with a couple. That's how I was able to see like Iron Eagle about a month early, like stuff like that.
Iron Eagle.
But they wouldn't do that on Showtime though.
Around that time, I still didn't have Showtime. I had the Movie Channel, which would have its premieres, but again, the Movie Channel was more kind of a boutique channel in a way, would show movies.
You had Movie Channel. What year did you start having the Movie Channel? Because would it have been after they merged with?
Yeah, it was after they merged. Because the guide I got, it was 84, and the guide I got always said Showtime Movie Channel Networks. Or Showtime Networks at the bottom of the thing.
You just brought up something that I think is sort of, I don't know if it's correct, but like you were saying that like a whole bunch of these studios were merging with Showtime or Viacom or something. I think what actually happened was...
it was MCA, Gulf Western, and Warner.
And then
Gulf Western owned Paramount. So
I think there was some sort of weird antitrust thing that said at the time all you studios cannot band together. I think they wanted to, and then I think that maybe that's what morphed into the Showtime will just buy up the exclusive rights to Paramount. They
wouldn't have considered this antitrust because each company only owned 25% ownership. Amounting to the 75. So not one company could own everything outright. It was like a partnership.
Well, I think that it may have been like almost like racketeering.
And it was only to show movies on cable. It wasn't for any other reason.
Well,
it was just
I know
for that.
for a fact that at that time, before all of these exclusive agreement, at least even during the exclusive agreement with Paramount, all those other studios like Warner and Universal would be on all of the services. Except for the Paramount movies. This was at the beginning of these exclusive deals where you had to end up getting all these different services to get all
there were some Paramount movies that did play on HBO at that time, but they were probably not full Paramount productions. They were probably really
these weird like producer studio things. Like I remember that Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Yeah. Even this was during that time of the exclusive agreement, but that was HBO, and I think that has like a Lucasfilm. That's like a Lucasfilm thing.
Yeah, they get first dibs. But at that time, like I said, I didn't have Showtime, but I had the Movie Channel, so the Movie Channel would often get everything that Showtime would show. I wasn't really able to get a lot of the shows. The only time you could ever see like Showtime, any of the early original productions, was when they would eventually be syndicated. So I got to see stuff like It's Gary Shandling's Show. You remember that? That was a great show.
I was on. That was a weird thing where kind of near the end of it, it was on Fox too. And like he said, here's a special thing for our Fox audience.
Plus, they changed the title. It was It's Gary Shandling Show on Showtime, and then they changed it to The Gary Shandling Show on when it was playing on regular network.
Because because like it.
No, it was still the same theme song, which is like.
You're right. I guess it kind of fits.
It was. This is the theme to Gary Show. This is the theme. Gary Show. Gary called me up and asked if I would write his theme song. I'm almost halfway finished. How do you like it so far? How do you like the theme to Gary Show? Here's the part where I whistle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually, if you watch that show, and I know a lot of people, they watch Seinfeld and consider it innovative. A lot of what you see on Seinfeld is taken from that show. It's just that Gary Shandling tends to break the fourth wall. He dresses the camera. He's got a studio audience. It's like
he's got his flashback machine. I remember that.
Yeah, and he's just setting up all this sitcom stuff. And what makes it so damned innovative is that you're a part of it in a way because he's like talking to you. There were other shows like The Outer Limits and Poltergeist: The Legacy. Also, do you remember Lex? Do you remember Lex?
Was Lex at Showtime or
was Showtime originally?
Didn't it kind of start on Showtime as like TV movies or something?
It was I believe the BBC produced it, and then they kind of cut it up and made it like long
And it wasn't called
story arc.
Lex. It was called like Tales from some alternate dimension or something. I can't remember exactly what it was called.
But I always wonder, because I never watched it on Showtime, but I did watch it on Sci-Fi, and and they cut the hell out of it, and I was like, why did they cut this? This is all cut. There's nudity in here and everything, and there's a lot of sweat.
Yeah.
And it was a very sexy kind of a show, and then I find out later that it was originally produced for Showtime.
Okay, now this kind of dovetails right into my original, because I had a whole bunch of memories that you didn't have that you wanted me to sort of extrapolate on.
Go ahead.
About like stuff I saw.
Are we going to talk about
Showtime
Karen
early.
Kay soon? I want to talk about Karen Kay at some point.
Oh, okay, yeah, we got to get to that because oh my goodness. So I just got another memory of this movie, and then you get into like the after hours, and again, we're all watching an after hours movie. 3 guys. I'm just surprised nobody whipped it out at some point.
So we're talking about Showtime After Hours, which was that the first experiment in erotic movies for a cable network?
Yes, and remember, these are just
This is
hard
before Skinamax and all that.
These are basically, as Joe Bob Briggs would say, an Italian sex flick.
Okay.
There's a lot of movies from like foreign territories that are a little naughty, like got some breasts.
Oh yeah.
Again, this was the search for nudity that was so hard to do before there was an internet.
Yes.
And I think the first, I'm trying to think of this movie called The Sex Machine. And
what's it about?
Okay, it's interesting. Okay, so it's a future post-apocalyptic, but everything seems to be okay because there's no budget. And again, it's in the Italian sex flick, where it's basically things would be hooked up to your body, and then that's how they were able to power the world or something. So they're basically like energy, like they needed to produce energy like cheaply, or they needed it, and so that they would hook things up to people, and then they would fuck.
Was it released in 1976 by any chance?
I'm gonna guess. I think I'm pretty sure it's one of my early Showtime memories of inappropriate stuff being watched.
Okay, the later stuff that I remember from Showtime, middle of the night kind of stuff, big tits and everything, and now when I interviewed Fred Olenray, the filmmaker Fred Olenray, whose work is all over that, and Jim Wynorski and people like that making these erotic movies. So there would be movies like The Ghost and the Teeny Weeny Bikini.
Yes,
and
that's what they show. That's what they have on there now.
The Witches of Breastwick and Dinosaur Island.
A lot of these things feel like sort of just below porn, and
they're
not even that hot. Really,
that's what Mr. Olenray said to me. He said you couldn't get like serious actors to be in these movies, so you had to kind of go scouring for porno actors. So you would see a lot of these people that you recognize from porno films appearing in these non-adult movies, like erotic horror, erotic science fiction. What's another one? Femalien is another one I'm thinking of.
I'm just remembering one of my favorite sort of in that time frame, which is not that long ago. I'm thinking of Misty Monday.
Monday, yeah. So he would be able to get these guys because he tried to get actors and like other actors, like legitimate, I guess, not porno actors, and they couldn't do it because they were just, I don't know, they just weren't trained to do that kind of stuff. So they gave up the industry that was producing, because they made good money selling this stuff to networks like Showtime and Cinemax. And it would be like you would spend like maybe $100,000 on a movie, and you'd make back $1 million in distribution to a cable station.
There was also like around that time there would be like these sort of series that they would run for like a long time. These sort of anthology series where it'd be like erotic confessions or something. I remember the title, where it's basically somebody would like call in and then they would tell their erotic story, and it would be these these actresses. They were, again, that was a little more classy from what I remember. These were kind of less porn and more sort of a little bit of acting, a little bit of story, and then some. They were almost like those erotic thrillers that you would get like at the video store kind of things, like Body Chemistry. They were more sort of in that vein, and then like they'd be kind of like it's shot hazily and everything. And that was way later. Like the only kind of stuff you get on After Hours at the time would be just like whatever they could get that had nudity and was foreign and was like hard, kind of European hard R, but nothing too bad that they wouldn't get in trouble for or anything.
You didn't really see a spike or the peak of erotic movies until the early 90s began. I would say probably with the beginning of when Fatal Attraction was released, that spawned this whole erotic thriller subgenre that was really popular throughout the 90s and then quickly died off. Moving on from one brand of cheesecake to another, let's talk about our girl. Her name was Karen Kay, and
these were the sort of bumper promo things that they would do, and they're like, tonight on Showtime, and then like, I don't want to watch this movie, but I want to watch this movie, and
it's kind of it was kind of like this skit situation where they're sitting in a living room, a la Married with Children, with a husband and his wife or something, and they were actually really married, right? This couple.
Yeah, we looked that up like a long time ago about like because I was extolling the virtues of how hot she was, and
she had a Beverly D'Angelo quality to her.
Yes, and
although she kind of appeared, she appeared in a movie called My Tutor,
which is interestingly enough, this is something I pulled out of my ass. This is a movie that I think was an HBO exclusive movie because it was a Crown International movie, which was, I think, part of Orion, which was exclusive to HBO. So it's like this woman that I knew from Showtime would be in this movie that was on HBO a lot.
Right.
Interesting.
And she was, now she had studied and practiced improvisational theater with a group called the War Babies Improvisational Theater, and then she wound up becoming famous. But she also appeared on The Love Boat in 10 episodes. And
I gotta find those episodes.
And she appeared on series like 21 Jump Street, Mr. Belvedere, Fantasy Island, Simon and Simon, Matt Houston, Taxi, Murder, She Wrote.
Remember, It's Your Move.
It's Your Move, which was her gig, actually, being the lead, and she was on that show with the guy, I believe, David Garrison, who was
but was she the lead?
Children.
I think that Jason Bateman was the lead of that
show.
Yeah,
but she was the mom.
She played the mom, and oh my goodness. Okay, so Bill Harris was sort of this was either right before or around the same time of things coming up like Entertainment Tonight, where it's like he would come in and he would give you entertainment news, but it was always these things that were like sort of general, like movies coming out this month, and sort of the Hollywood do this sort of Hollywood Minute or Hollywood whatever segment. He'd talk like the top 10 movies. This was a time when you could do top 10 movies for the month because movies were much more spread out. And he'd always had this like, we'll talk again. He had his mustache and his hair and his glasses and everything. I always thought
he was like a kind of like video spokesperson for Showtime, kind of like in a way that Mason Adams was for HBO.
Yeah, and he would always talk about like the Showtime exclusives. You know, not this week, not this month, not even next year will you see these things on HBO. And then I always found him amusing. He did Showtime for a while, but then he was basically the co-host of At the Movies when Siskel and Ebert left and did their own show. It would be him and Rex Reed.
Oh, okay.
And it would be him and Rex Reed. And some of my favorite memories, and I hope we can find these on YouTube someday. And I wish I'd saved my tapes because I actually had a tape of their review of Over the Top.
Oh.
And it's like Rex Reed, I give this film 0 stars. Bill gave it 1 star for the truck. I always remember that. Yeah.
Showtime acknowledging HBO and competing with them.
Yeah.
And it becomes a competition, even though Showtime would be offered, like I said, it would be offered, if you got HBO, you could get Showtime for a little bit less. It's like if you ordered it. So you would get Showtime if you wanted it. And it would be like $9.99 a month or something. It would be very cheap. Comparison.
They were basically almost because they were owned by a much larger company, Viacom.
Yeah.
Because at the time, HBO was just owned by Time Inc. It was not a Time Warner thing until like 1989 when they merged. So they were just owned by Time Inc. You know, a big company, but probably not as big as Viacom. I'm going to guess.
Well, it's Time Life and Time Warner and all that, right? So it was a big company, but I think HBO was going mainly at the time, and probably still does now, even with Game of Thrones and everything, for the prestige. Whereas Showtime is trying to offer, I guess, something more along the lines of fun and weird. So that's why you would have a show like Weeds or Californication.
Perhaps, they would basically be able to kind of like when you buy electronics of like they will undercut the competition for a little while.
Yeah.
And basically be like, you can get us cheaper, and then it gets the customer, because they don't have as many subscribers as HBO, but they've always been kind of close.
They've been close, and competition is good for capitalism, but it can be a pain in the ass for the consumer because of all the movie rights issues, buying up the rights. Well, if HBO doesn't have it, Showtime has it, so I have to get both.
I have every premium service on my thing. I have HBO, I have Showtime. You get Stars. Maybe we'll get into Stars at some point. Stars. You got to have Epics, and then of course you have like the Netflix and the Amazon. They have their own exclusives, so it starts to build up. But my bill isn't that bad, so I can't complain. I mean,
that's gonna be in the end. At the end of the day, I hate to use that phrase, but you're looking at a $300-$400 cable bill. Or
I mean, my bill, including my internet, is still like $180 some because I did the thing where you call up and you complain and say, "But I want to have the good package. Can I have a promo package?" And then all right, we'll give you the promo package.
Well, your cable company likes its customers apparently.
It does.
Mine doesn't. Mine is like, fuck you.
Fuck you.
What, you gonna leave? All right, fuck you. There's the door. Make friends
fuck
with
you.
it. But that's the way it is in New York.
Basically, I always liked Showtime when we had it. Most of my good Showtime memories are of very early Showtime, early 80s. Oh, they used to do this, like they show a lot of kids programming. I remember like in the afternoon, they had a lot of kids, family. I can't remember what it was called. It was like a specific segment like Family Time or something like that. And they would show, that again, it would kind of go like to foreign movies or it's like whatever we can get cheap. So it'd be a lot of things from Australia, a lot of things from like dubbed things, but basically just good cheap program. I remember one of the early memories is watching this very cheaply made Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer show that I think was made in Canada because all the kids said a boot. And then there was the beginning of like the kids from Degrassi, like it was like Degrassi something, like the kids. Degrassi Kids or something. It was the
Degrassi High, yeah.
Degrassi. It was even before Degrassi High. It was like the kids from Degrassi or something. It was before they even went into like school, and I think it was different kids.
Oh, okay.
I remember that, but I was always entertained, and it also had to do with the geography of where the room was. It was just sort of more it was like we had two sort of TV rooms and two 19-inch TVs in different rooms, where we had Showtime in one room with like the Zenith Beta and the Rube Goldberg.
Yeah, the Showtime room and the HBO room.
HBO room, because at the time. If you subscribed to one service, if we had HBO and Showtime in both rooms, you'd have to pay for HBO and Showtime twice. And that, I mean, thank goodness. I mean, I seem to remember that's one of those things where George H.W. Bush, rest in peace, maybe, he actually didn't. He vetoed some sort of cable bill. This was kind of near the end of his presidency. Actually, he vetoed a cable bill that would have fixed it, so you could just pay for one thing in a household and you could all you had to do was rent the box and that's what you paid for. And he vetoed it, but they actually had a Congress that worked at the time and they overrode his veto by a few votes. So the bill passed.
Well, this
is America.
Yes.
And it helped consumers. Maybe it screwed over the cable because it was bad for business, but was it bad for business though? Because it just enabled people to buy more cable and cable would expand.
Now it seems like the cable company pays for the channel. They pay a lot now and to get the right to air that channel.
Yeah, and then they package everything because there's only like a few companies that own these channels. It's like, okay, you can have our great channel, but you have to buy all of our shitty channels that nobody watches.
Yeah. And then if one company doesn't step in line, you get a problem like we have over here where we have no Channel 11 and you have no CBS.
I still have no CBS. I work around. I have the CBS app and I can watch CBS shows and I can watch, it lets me stream my local CBS affiliate if I want to.
I guess let's wrap this one up.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one.
What are we going to talk? What are we talking about next time? I think we should probably talk about basic cable channels.
All right.
I want to talk about things like CNN, Nickelodeon, TBS, the Nashville Network.
Can we go into Fox News and I can get pissed off?
Fox News. Fox News. And MSNBC.
Yes.
And also... Jeez, I can't. Oh, MTV. Fuck.
Of course.
Yeah. So until then, I'm David Lawler, the Russian bot. I was joined by David Anderson, the NPC, and we will see you on the NPC network.
Ding, ding, ding.
Gotta say goodnight. Good night.
Good night.
We had Showtime, but I didn't really like Showtime. Mainly for the fact is, and this is just me talking out of my ass, but it just seemed like they never got the best movies because they didn't have any good contracts with the studios. I remember Showtime had nothing but Orion movies on. Like, you would always see Orion films. Like, my dad recorded RoboCop on when we first got our VHS VCR in 1987. I believe in 1988 he recorded Predator. He recorded RoboCop. I remember he recorded RoboCop 2 for me. Throw Mama from the Train. I believe Eddie and the Cruisers 2 was on there at one point in time. We started off with all the movie channels until the cable company caught on. And then my parents said, okay, we'll get Showtime. They didn't have the Movie Channel, Cinemax, anything else. They didn't even have the Disney Channel, because back in those days, Disney Channel was a subscribed service. They just had basic cable with the cable box, and we had pay-per-view, and then we had Showtime. I think one of the main problems, now Showtime now is better than it originally was, but I think the main problem with all of you talk about your 4 premium channels. Now, of course, Cinemax and HBO are one and the same. Same with the Movie Channel and Showtime. They're one and the same. Now, this is the 80s, before Stars, before Epix, before Encore, before all this stuff. Showtime was I want to say it was the only channel that offered original programming. I want to say that. And this is back in the 80s. Because, again, I don't ever remember Showtime ever showing original programming. Neither did the Movie Channel. You may know this, but I don't remember original programming on those stations. I don't even remember any good original Showtime shows. Dexter was the one that pretty much kicked it off for them. I want to say it was Dexter. The Outer Limits, that was 95. Now I remember, because the Poltergeist, The Legacy, and Outer Limits. Now, the reason I want to say, I did this in my last YouTube video, the reason I totally forgot about those 2 shows was because there was a syndication deal in place with those shows to be aired on Showtime and in standard syndication on regular TV, except they would be censored because of the way it was. Shameless is all right. I actually was an extra on Shameless for the first season. I'm trying to think of those other shows. Dexter was a show I love. I still need to get it on Blu-ray. Another show that you mentioned, frickin' Dead Like Me. Great frickin' show. Show that should have never got canceled.